So the next step that we have to do is we need to create our customer object. So what we do is do add customer equals stripe customer dot create with two parameters, their email, which we take from params stripe email, and source, which we take from params stripe token. Now I want to point to you over to the documentation for tokens, and really a token is kind of like a credit card, and you really tokenize the credit card, and each token can only be used for one transaction. So you can read all about that by going to tutorials.charges and reading up about the tokens. Now flipping back over, what we need to do next is we need to make a new array for our Stripe transactions. So what this array does is it's used later so we can update the Stripe transactions with their TRX order ID. You'll know more about this at a later point in the video. And we want to assign amount total equals 0, and this of course is to keep track of the total. And if you're wondering where the Stripe token and the Stripe email comes from, well, they come from the received parameters that you also get with the Stripe billing name and Stripe shipping name. So that's where they come from. Now, moving on, I want to go to our session SVC, and that stands for Stripe vendor charges if you have forgotten, and do a loop over them with key and array. Now, if you forgot what the results of session SVC is, let's take a look back. So Stripe vendor charges is really called when the total project meal fee is calculated. And if we do a find for that, you can see that that's calculated in our checkout page, which we are currently on. So when this is calculated, at the same time we call this session, we create a session and save that in a session of our Stripe vendor charges, which breaks down our cart and tallies up the total according to the vendor. So it returns an array of Stripe user ID and their total. So that's what we're looping against. So let's just go back to our function over here, and we do a token stripe token dot create. And I know I sound like a broken record, but again, go to Stripe tutorial charges and just search for token to read up on it, because you pretty much tokenize your credit card, and each token can only be used once. So because in this loop we're doing several transactions, so let's say if we are buying items from 5 different vendors, then in that case we need to create 5 different tokens, because each token can be used once, and we have 5 vendors, so we need to have 5 tokens. So the parameters taken in the token is rather quite simple. It is customer ID, which we get from here, and Stripe account is our array Stripe ID, which we set back here in our Stripe vendor charges. You can see that we assign our Stripe user ID into the Stripe ID key. So that's where we get our parameters for the token there. So Stripe will return a token for us. So that is what we charge the customer. So instead of the card, we use the token. So we do a charge equals stripe charge dot create, and open up the parentheses or the brackets, and then we open up some curly brackets because Stripe needs some information and we're going to give them that. So we do source. Our source is our token ID, which we have here, and then we have our amount. And our amount is array total times 100 to I. And our array total is the same place where we got our array strip ID. Now our description here would just be cart purchase. We can get our currency from session currency, which we saved into our session ISO code. Shipping, we would assign our shipping variable, which we defined earlier. And application fee, we would grab from our array as well, where we get our stripe ID. And remember that when Stripe calculates, they calculate by cents. So that's why you times by 100. And then the Stripe account that we are curious about in this case, which is our vendor, we give them array stripe ID. So that's who we're paying. So good so far. So I actually want to tighten this up a bit, so let's just do that. I don't need that variable here. And let's just also tighten this up. Okay, so good so far. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to handle the case when the charge is a success. So if the charge succeeded, then what we want to do is we want to record that data. So if charge paid is true, then what I want to do is I want to define stripe charge as equal to TXN type, and we'll get that from charge object. So charge is really kind of what Stripe returns to us, and with it comes a lot of other information that we want to record. So that's what we're doing. So we want our TXN type, our currency, total amount, our tax amount, notification params, TXN ID, status, and description. And before I go anywhere, I want to come over here to our TRX orders, and I want to do serialize notification params. And remember, what serialize does is it pretty much saves into our database as an object. So that's all it really does. So we're going to save our notification params as an object, and if we need that information, we grab it back as an object. So that's that. Let's flip back over here to our TRX orders, and right under stripe charges, I want to calculate the total. So amount total equals amount total plus array total, which we grab from the same place, times 100 to I. So what we're doing here is we're keeping track of the total. And then after that, I want to create Stripe transaction. So I want to make a record of that in the Stripe transactions table, which we have defined here. And lastly, I want to push the ID of the Stripe transaction array, or push the ID into the Stripe transaction array for later use. So that's where I want us to leave off. I mean, the function is still not finished yet. There's still some things that we have to do, but this is a really, really good start. So why don't we call it quits here, and please rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Thanks for watching.